4,000 miles away, a family in Atlanta, Georgia in the US, huddled around their TV screens and watched Britain's Black Lives Matter protests unfold. What they saw made their spirits soar. This trio had watched repeatedly over the past fortnight, with a combination of pride and hope, and fear when violence flared. As similar protesters reacting to the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis, Minnesota, swirled across America, including a few miles from their homes. But there was something particularly powerful about the largely peaceful UK scenes. What was so encouraging to me was the crowds weren't all black Britons marching. You had black Britons, a lot of white Britons, Asian Britons. You had a real cross-section of people coming together in Britain saying, "This is enough," explains Andrea Waters-King. "We have felt supported and inspired by what we have seen in the UK," adds her husband, Martin Luther King III. This family, of course, have a special reason to be buoyed by the global demos. They are seeing in the face of 46-year-old Floyd's death on May 25th, which exemplifies deep-rooted discrimination across the US and the world. Human rights advocate Mr. King is a son of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., whose campaign for civil rights for African Americans was brought to a tragic halt 52 years ago with his assassination by James Earl Ray on April 4, 1968. And the 12-year-old Yolanda, sitting serious next to her parents, is the iconic figure's only grandchild who wishes she could have met her Baba King and sat on his knee. Poignantly, she turned 12 the day Floyd died, and more than ever feeling confused and angry, she would love to speak to her grandfather. In the UK, protests have at times turned to violence. Last weekend, crowds in Bristol tore down a statue of a slave trader Edward Colston. While the Kings do not condone violence, they advocate a different way, but are empathetic. I always believe there is a way to get things done, the right way, but people are emotionally frustrated right now. I certainly concur with the spirit, says Mr. King, 62. These statues belong in museums. The public has to acknowledge its history. I just don't believe they are symbols that represent unification of communities. So don't belong on the outside. They don't belong in the places of honor. My father used to say a right is a language of the unheard. And while he never condoned violence, he certainly understood why people would protest with violence, why they are forced to violence. The family point out the UK's slave trade history is tied to Americans and agree there are similarities between racism faced here and in their country. Although they also highlight Brexit as a specific catalyst for division, the vote was a vote that emboldened a racist attitude to say the others are not important. It's all about us. We need to disconnect from the people target, immigrants, believes Mr. King. There is also a disturbing parallel to be drawn between a racist comment made by their president and the racist language previously used by our PM. The couple say, while Donald Trump isn't listening, Boris Johnson must. Mrs. King says, I'd hope he'd use the moment to listen to his people and make atonement for where he has made errors and try to build a better society for all Britons. He has an opportunity to be a different type of leader to what we have witnessed here. I believe he has a brand new baby. I'd hope he would be cognizant of what type of world he wants for his child and all British children. Mr. King described how his family were all brought to tears, anger, frustration and hostility when they watched the video showing Floyd bleeding for breath as police officer Derek Chauvin knelt on his neck for almost 9 minutes. Chauvin faces charges of second-degree murder and manslaughter, while 3 other officers are charged with aiding and abetting murder. Initially, he admits he couldn't bear to watch the heinous act. We saw the life come out of this human being who couldn't do anything. he says a rare flash of anger. He believes police discrimination against African Americans would not exist if his father had not been shot. Mr. King, age 10, when his dad died, recalls racial harassment. Every now and then, one of us would pick up the phone and people would make very nasty threats, using the N-word or tell us to get out, he says. Yet he was taken on marches with his dad and witnessed the strength of feeling he galvanized. I traveled with my dad 8 or 9 times and marched 2 or 3 times, but I didn't see any violence, he recalls. If my father had lived, and others would be in a different world. I ask whether, as an adult, he has experienced racism. Yolande whispers in his ear, urging him to speak out. He describes times white colleagues have been treated differently, served first, adding, "I have been called the N-word, particularly when I was young." Mr. King admits, "I am very concerned for Yolanda's future, but I am hopeful now because of the demonstration. I do believe we are embarking upon monumental change. I don't think the nation has a choice, and I hope the change reverberate all around the world. I think my father's dream will become closer to becoming reality."